Perfect. Now I'll start like I'd remembered to do it all along. So we're joined this evening by Camille, an anti-racist feminist, LGBTQ plus rights activist, vegan, former CNPQ researcher, and master in communication. Also with us tonight is Ayanata, who's from Rio de Janeiro, medical student, as you can tell from the stethoscope. Yeah. So yeah, joining us for this session. So massive welcome and thank you very much. So to start off the session, Melanie is going to start us off and begin.
Hello everyone, my name is Melanie. I'm Colombian. I'm currently studying in the University of Leeds, and I'm just gonna do a little introduction for the session, ground us all to understand why we're here and the topics that we're gonna touch upon. Just to briefly explain the context of the importance of human rights of Indigenous people in South America, we need to evaluate the complicated culture around colonialism and racism that currently exists in South America, and the fact that colonialism and the violence that is perpetuated by it has not ended. This colonial violence, in the form of murdering, silencing, and discriminating against Indigenous people, continues in the form of potentially multinational companies and armed groups. I couldn't say that word. I'm sorry. So armed groups that have been set up by drug cartels to oppress Indigenous peoples and to mobilize them away from their own territories. And this means that currently we are seeing an increasing surging of violence against Indigenous peoples and communities of color that are protecting crucial ecosystems that we all depend upon. This is a direct effect from racist bias that currently exists of the ways of living of Indigenous peoples. And it is an opportunity for all of us to reflect and to highlight oppressed and Indigenous people's voices around conservation in order to preserve their ways of living and their ancestral ways of engaging with the natural world, so that we can continue to perceive a future where people continue living in harmony with Mother Earth. We need to also think about that although Indigenous people represent 5% of the population worldwide, they currently protect 80% of the biodiversity of the world. And this means that although Indigenous self-determination is not being respected by governments in South America, ensuring and protecting Indigenous human rights is so much more crucial now than ever before, to highlight their fight as our own and to unify as all humans as one humanity. So I'll pass to Eve. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melanie. So what I'm going to do now is share a short video. So please just bear with me while I set that up. Okay. Let me know if you can't see or hear that, but I think it should.
Sem a floresta a gente não temos nada, a gente não somos nada. É a floresta que é a nossa mãe, nossa casa, nosso lar, né? Então, sem a floresta a gente não é nada. Sem a floresta não existe povos indígenas. O clima global, temperatura do sol, da descontrolada de chuva, né? Então tudo isso vem também porque estão acabando com a natureza. E isso, quem controla tudo é a natureza. Natureza, né? A natureza faz tudo pra gente.
Nós ficamos com medo, que nós não podíamos nem, como é que podia apagar esse fogo, que a água que nós tínhamos, nós acabamos com tudo, atrás de apagar, mas e o fogo não deu jeito.
É muito importante a gente manter a nossa tradição, porque é que a gente tem o nosso conhecimento, né? O conhecimento a gente tem a nossa tradição, a nossa cultura. E é tão bonito, me sinto orgulhoso de ser um indígena e também manter minha tradição, né?
Se não chega a conhecer, quem é que vai mostrar isso? Então, por esse motivo que esse centro aqui é para ser isso, a fortalecimento da cultura nossa, para o povo conhecer e dar continuidade daqui para frente, e já tem terra onde plantar. Agora nós estamos aqui no centro com a Caruí Xibu. A gente compramos essa terra aqui para a gente ter direito. Todo mundo está vendo que queimou, né? Acabou com a floresta e a medicina que tem. Aqui já tiramos muitas várias medicinas, mas acabou com tudo, né? Aí isso que eu fico triste. Mas nessa hora, era 12h30, então o vento estava dando muito forte, jogava assim, um canto que ainda não tinha pegado, né? Pegava fasquinha de fogo e jogava mais para adiante, aí como não teve jeito, e queimou essa área aqui, 5 hectares que nós compramos, queimou.
Ninguém sabe como foi que pegou fogo essa chácara, mas só que pegou fogo.
Eu sei que foi alguma pessoa que queimou. Foi alguma pessoa, porque se por ela não ia queimar.
Foi uma pessoa que olhos grandes, né, com inveja, e tocou fogo para destruir, para fazer mal a nós.
Terra é para todos, não é só para mim, não é só para aquela pessoa, é para nós todos viver em cima dessa.
This session on climate and biodiversity with a lot of topics to be discussed.
Mesmo assim, quando nós morremos, nós não vamos levar nada, vamos levar nada.
A Amazônia não, eu vou trabalhar, que vou suar para ver a floresta subindo de novo, não que ver a floresta sendo destruída, mas sim reflorestando de novo. Seguir firme, só na frente, que a luta não é só dos povos indígenas, mas sim também da humanidade. Essa batalha só não é nossa, mas sim também da humanidade.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. I hope that played okay. And we're also going to watch another video just now. And I guess the reason for kind of having the two videos is, you know, for me, enough for me to kind of tell the stories of someone else. But the next video that we're going to watch is about quimbolos in Brazil. So just to give people a little bit of background, in case anyone didn't have any time to do their homework. So historically, the definition of quilombolo originated in the 19th century and described enslaved African people who had escaped plantations and formed large autonomous communities throughout Brazil, including the Amazon rainforest. And to give a bit of context as well, there was an estimated 4.9 million African people brought to Brazil at that time, brought over enslaved. So they were fleeing slavery's brutality and were determined to preserve their cultural heritage and become safeguarders of the earth. The Black population, the Quilombola, did not exist for the rulers until 1988. But although constitutional law now entitles land to the Quilombola, in practice it's extremely difficult. Communities spend years fighting for recognition, and these rights are also not recognised by ruralists, who are like an elite group of wealthy landowners who covet the land for agribusiness and mining and other like extractivist purposes. But yeah, so the Quilombola community spent years fighting for recognition. Today, there are more than 5,000 Quilombola communities, but only 100 or so have the title, so that's less than 2%. So the video is going to speak to what these land titles mean for communities. So again, bear with me for a second while I share my screen, and I'll stop my video so it will play better.
If us, then who?
Até pouco tempo, né, os quilombos tinham vergonha, né, de ser quilombola, até por conta da história da escravidão no Brasil, né?
Uma sensação de menosprezo, é menosprezo mesmo, é menosprezar, menosprezados que nós somos, que nós não somos importantes, somos insignificantes, uma nação que a gente ajudou a construir. É esse o meu sentimento.
Os quilombolas são escravos, né? Esses escravos vieram fugindo dos brancos e para lá eles conseguiram se esconder um pouco. Tenho 7 filhos e 31 netos. Esse que está aqui do meu lado tem 40. Então, com uns filhos desses, confirma que eu moro no tempo.
Foi através desses escravos que já foi colocado, né, que fugiram para ter uma liberdade. Então, eles lutaram tanto para hoje nós estarmos aqui.
E a gente vive uma vida feliz nessa comunidade. Cada vez mais crescendo e desenvolvendo. Então é isso.
sinto assim mais insegura, né? Porque a gente com o título em nossas mãos, a gente sabe que é nosso. E sem o título, não é nossa terra.
Faz com que a pressão sobre a terra seja muito grande. Ou as mineradoras, ou os grandes projetos agropecuários, ou as empresas de papel e celulose, que disputam grandes extensões de terra, e essa comunidade nunca teve o seu território reconhecido. Então eles estão à margem da cena política. Treinamos essas comunidades e elas produzem os mapas que representam seus territórios, colocando nesses mapas o que elas consideram mais relevante.
É uma coisa que todos nós aqui na comunidade queremos, né? Então é prioridade para nós, porque nós tendo o título da terra, tudo vai melhorar para a gente, né? Porque a gente vai se sentir mais seguro, vai ter segurança, vamos poder ter renda familiar, né?
Aí eu acho que isso aí é importante para a comunidade, né? Dá uma garantia para o quilombola, né? O direito pela a terra que ele mora.
É como se o mapa fosse mais que um instrumento de uma política de reconhecimento. Porque o grupo usa o mapa numa ação judicial, usa o mapa numa defesa dos seus direitos territoriais, usa o mapa como forma de reconhecimento da sua situação.
Então a gente sentiu assim que a curto tempo a gente finalizaria um trabalho. A gente vem há décadas querendo reconhecer resolver uma coisa que para nós é um sonho.
Nós estamos no quilombo do Vaporunduva, no Vale do Rio Ribeira de Guara. Então a gente demorou 12 anos, né, para conseguir o reconhecimento da comunidade. Aqui é um paraíso, né, onde a gente pode voar como se voa um passarinho, né, no ar, é livre, né, no ar. Estamos dentro da Mata Atlântica e lá é uma região onde tem bastante unidade de conservação. Toda a produção da terra é orgânica, né? Tem que ser feita na agricultura em um sistema que seja ambientalmente correto, para poder dar sustentabilidade para a comunidade.
Mas a gente aqui tem muitas coisas que dentro da mata a pessoa utiliza sem precisar acabar com a natureza, né? A gente tem mais de 300 espécies de conhecimento da comunidade e essas pessoas sobrevivem porque existe essa mata ainda.
Então, todas as comunidades negras no Brasil da resistência. Isso também tem avançado, até por conta de que o Brasil, né, a população brasileira não conhece os quilombos, né, a sua história, né, e através do turismo, né, principalmente turismo com escolas, com alunos, é uma forma de você passar a história para frente, né, uma forma de divulgar a história dos quilombos.
A luta pela identidade coletiva não se separa da luta pelo território. Nesse sentido, é um passaporte para a igualdade.
O verdadeiro sentido da liberdade é a terra titulada. Sem terra você não consegue nada. Com acesso à terra, o nosso futuro está garantido.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So now I'm going to pass you over to Camille. And yeah, take it away, Camille.
Okay, so I am Camille, and I'll try to track back in the history of Brazil. Where did we begin to have environmental problems? And it was since the very beginning of the country. Can we show the first picture, please? Excuse me. So, as we learn in the history books in Brazil, and we learn that the colonies of Portugal and Spain in South America, were extractivist colonies. So we had cycles, economic cycles in Brazil, all based on extractive activities. And the first was with the Pau Brazil. Brazil, I think that it might be translated as redwood in English. And this picture shows what the Portuguese did when they first arrived here in Brazil. They tried to enslave indigenous people to cut redwood, but they couldn't. And so they start bringing African people later to Brazil to do the extractive activity with sugarcane. But what is important for us to know is that the word brasileiro, that means Brazilian, is actually the profession of those who cut the pau Brazil, who cut the redwoods. So the name of our nationality is connected to the deforestation of our forests and our environment. And so I'm here trying to broaden the look beyond the Amazon. Of course, we have a problem in Amazon. Only in 2020, we recorded the highest number of wildfire and over 50,000 focuses of fire only in September in the rainforest. Can we pass the image? And we are not only struggling with fire, we are also struggling with mining, especially illegal mining, which is contaminating the rivers and which is killing the indigenous community in Amazon. And we are also struggling with the farmers turning forest into pasture for cattle and soy planting. So yes, we need to send a message to Brazil that we're not consuming any gold, silver, and precious metals anymore. And we need to track the origins of the meat we consume, because we do not have the control in Brazil of the illegal farms in Amazon, in Cerrado, or in Pantanal. So we need the world to send a message to the Bolsonaro's government that they are not consuming any more illegal meat, and we need to increase the tracking of it. And this is the Cerrado, and the situation in Cerrado, it's actually really, really, really bad. Cerrado is considered the water tank of Brazil. And I'll tell you why. Its area houses springs of riverbeds of 8 hydrographic basins among the 12 that exist in the country. So the situation in Cerrado should be addressed as well by the international community, by the international community who are trying to address the situation of the environmental racism or the climate changes. Can we see this picture? And Cerrado is also the home of the Calunga community. It is in the Midwest of Brazil, and Calunga community is a Quilombola community which is struggling with fires in the Cerrado. And if Cerrado burns, we won't have any water in Brazil, so we should really be concerned about what's happening also in Cerrado. I think this one is in Pantanal or in the Cerrado. Can we pass? We're also having, this is Pantanal. This is Pantanal. The situation of fire in Pantanal is really, really, really bad. And it has started in farms. Actually, the federal police in Brazil is investigating only five farmers for beginning the fires in Pantanal. And between January and August of this year, 23% of the area of Pantanal was burned. And wow, it's so sad because Pantanal houses one of the most amazing diversity of species in the world. And it is also in the Midwest, and it is also struggling because the farmers are turning the Pantanal into pasture, basically to plant soil. So yes. Can we pass this picture? Yes, this is actually here in Niterói. I live in Niterói, in Brazil. We are having many troubles with landsliding. I'll talk about this later, about the urban effects of the deforestation, of the environmental racism, of the climate changes. This is what happens every summer here in Brazil. People who die in the landsliding because they're Black, because they live up in the communities, up in the favelas, because there are no policies of housing, because there are no policies to stop climate changes. And we'll talk later about the urban effects of the climate changes. Right now, let me just tell you about the Bolsonaro government. So since the very beginning of the Bolsonaro government in 2019, we are having a increasing of environmental crimes. Actually, in January 25th of 2019, we had the tailings dam rupture in Brumadinho. I don't know if you heard, but I think that it was the biggest environmental crime in history. And I mean the history of the world, the whole world. And in the same year, we had the oil spill in the Northeast, which is contaminating the population who live by the shore. And we still had no solution for this. So we don't have how to forecast what will happen in the next years with this population who are consuming the fishes, who are going to the beaches, who are living by the shores where the oil spill happened. And it was in a huge area of our country. And in this year, as you know, we have the epidemics, which is also an effect of the climate changes. This year, we had the fires, which are calling the attention of the whole world to our country. And right now, I'll tell you about the urban effects of the climate changes. When we talk about climate changes, we need to know that it is a Black people issue. It should be Black people issue because the most affected people the most affected people in Brazil are the Black community and also the indigenous community. So I better say it's an issue of the people of color in Brazil, in the whole world. Last year I was in Canada, and I can tell you that from the pipelines in Alberta, from the wildfire in Amazon, we see that the most affected people are the indigenous people and the Black people in the Americas. And when we talk about environmental racism, we need to talk about this government that allowed 1,745 new pesticides only in less than 2 years, only in 18 months of government. We need to talk about the floods in cities that causes the landslide, landing, and causes the outbreaks of dengue and virus. And we need to talk about lack of basic sanitation in the cities. Just for you to know, in Rio de Janeiro, over 57% of the houses have no sanitation, no basic sanitation. And we need to address environmental racism as the main cause of this. And we also need to talk about the epidemics. By this morning, I was reading in the papers that Bolivia has recorded the transmission of rare virus between humans, and we are already struggling in Brazil with the epidemics of COVID-19. And Black people in Brazil have over 60% of chances of dying from COVID-19, and it is 60% more than white people in Brazil. And yes, I hope I have broadened to you the situation of what's going on, because it's not only the Amazon. We're not only concerned by the Amazon, we're also concerned about the Cerrado. We're also concerned about Pantanal. We are concerned about the urban effects of the deforestation, of the lack of sanitation, of the lack of environmental policies to stop the climate changes. And just to finish what I'm saying about environmental racism being in people of color issue, I need to tell you that the guy who named this phenomenon as environmental racism was actually a civil rights leader in the United States named Dr. Benjamin Franklin Chavez Jr., who was assistant of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And the term of environmental racism came from his investigation and research between toxic waste and the Black community in the USA. So I think that we will have to the chance of talk a little bit longer about this as the question starts. And I also asked Eve to look for a picture of these young activists. Yes, this was in the Cerrado. Yes, so that's also why we need to talk about environmental racism. I was watching this documentary about the Economic Forum, World Economic Forum, and all I was seeing was these white leaders talking about the future of our nation and talking about the climate changes. And I guess this picture was taken in the World Economic Forum 2019. I need to confirm this information, but it shows who are leading the discussion of the climate changes, and these need to change. We need to be the leaders, we as Black people, we as Black communities, we as indigenous people, we need to lead the discussions of environmental racism as the people who are the most affected by this. So yes, as you can see, the lecture is out of frame, and this is what's happening when we see the World Economic Forum or when we see the action of Greenpeace. We're not seeing Black people talking. We're not seeing indigenous people talking. And we're struggling in our communities in the whole world. We were struggling in the whole American. If it is in Canada, or if it is in USA, or if it is in Brazil, or if we're talking about indigenous people in Colombia, or if we're talking about indigenous people in Brazil or in Bolivia, we are the ones who are the most affected by the effects of the climate changes. So that's why the talk about environmental racism is so important. That's why we need to address these discussions.
Thank you so much, Camille. I'm sure, like myself, everyone's got like a million questions. But yeah, there's a couple of things that I definitely want to ask a question about. But before I jump the queue, we were going to take questions in the chat or kind of have a discussion. But before we do so, we were just going to take about 5 minutes to reflect, to come up with your question, and also because it's almost 7, so people needed to kind of pop off for a sec for a comfort break, and then when we come back with your questions, and we'll facilitate those. But thank you so much, Camille. So yeah, we'll see everyone back again in 5 minutes.
Okay, should we start answering?
Yes, if you want to.
Okay, so what are the means of resistance that the Quilombos are employing to resist the mining, deforestation, meat industry? Actually, I don't really know, but we can see in the newspapers every day that they are doing advocacy, trying to do advocacy in the Congress and with the parliamentary guys, but they don't have economic means to fight back. Right now in the elections that were in last Sunday, we've seen indigenous people entering the city councils. We've seen Black women also being elected for the city councils. We've seen some Quilombola people also being elected for the city councils, but this number is it's it's not enough. It's not enough. But we are seeing right now with the Bolsonaro government destroying this country that the agenda of the climate changes are not avoidable anymore. People cannot avoid talking about climate change. So they are paying more attention in the Quilombola communities and the indigenous communities. I think this is good, but this is not enough. So we are seeing international advocacy in these areas to stop the climate changes. So actually, here in Niterói, I live almost nearby a quilombo, and the leader of this quilombo was also running for the city council. He didn't make it, but this year in the elections, we've seen the parties, the elect parties, trying to elect Black candidates, quilombola candidates, and indigenous candidates, because we are going through a change of mindset in the institutional policies, politics here in Brazil. We are seeing that we cannot do politics in this colonialized way, only electing white guys, only electing white middle class people for the city councils, for as mayors or as congress people, So we are going through a change of mindset, but we are only going through these changes because the impact of Bolsonaro's government in the environment area is so bad, really, 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 really bad. Actually, last year in São Paulo, the fires in the Midwest, and Midwest, I mean Cerrado and Amazon, were so intense that the skies in São Paulo went dark in the middle of the evening. I don't know if you already been in Brazil, but as you go to the south of the country, and São Paulo is in the southeast, the sunset hour is later. So in São Paulo, it uses to happen between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. And at 4 p.m., it looked already like sunset in São Paulo because of the intensity of the fires. So it's not avoidable anymore to talk about environment. And let me see the other questions.
I would like to say something. I think the key for understand the question, the problem with Quilombos community started when Brazil make a mark for in 1850 when we have as imperator Peter the second, and this law stopped making Black people to have access to land. So now this year, 2020, we have exactly the same problem. What the Brazil needs is change the access for people giving access to land. So you see in the video, the people talk about how important it is say, this is my land. There is the land are they, but in observe, there is not. So more than making means or electing people or something like that, what the Quilombo peoples need is the access to for the land. So in Brazil in 2003, when President Lula was the president of Brazil, he created a secretary, the name is Sepir. But Bolsonaro, it's a shit, it is. But do not Bolsonaro finish the Sepir, was Dilma Rousseff. So the actual president Bolsonaro is not okay for the Quilombo people. But I try to show that problem is not Bolsonaro problems, it's the problem for the government of Brazil. So Camille says something important. The people who elected, who go and take the power, it is almost the same peoples. So we have elections last Sunday, and a lot of people of color, black peoples, make present yourself to get elected, but they don't. Today I read in the paper the profile from the people who elected, effectively elected, was the white man, middle age. So there is not the problem from we don't have access for land. It's the system. The system works to make white people have power, have land, have everything, have money. So for make the Columbus people suffering because of that.
So next question, just to add to Jonathan, Sepir, we can translate it as the Secretary of Promotion of Racial Equality.
It is.
And yes, so how can you resist government endorsed violence and murder? Actually, every government in Brazil since the very beginning of this country endorsed violence. Even the government of Lula, who was the coolest president we have. You should know Lula. Lula actually created the UPPs, the Unities of Pacific policy specification unities in favelas, and Lula said that now the police only kills or only commits violence against those who deserve it. And so every government in Brazil is violent against people since the very beginning. Bolsonaro is the worst. But even when we had Lula or Dilma,
the difference of
we
Bolsonaro,
we had to face.
Talking. The difference from Bolsonaro and the others is just he talk about it, and we meet him, and I think that's more easy to take and do something because he talk about it. I think one thing we needed to make in your hand too, it is the President Biden, elected Biden, say to if Brazil don't preserve Amazonia, we go take economic sanctions. I don't know this word. That's a great idea because their people really understand the power of money, and I think this is a great way to make the government understand the necessity to talk about it, something in Brazil, and for people of Quilombos or African descendants, for example.
So just to finish what I was saying about violence, actually who created the anti-drugs law in Brazil wasn't Bolsonaro, it was Lula. The anti-drugs law of Bolsonaro increased in more than 600% the arrests of Black women, 600% the incarceration of Black women in Brazil. So yes, we're not only facing government Bolsonaro, but as Ionata says, he's the most explicit to talk about it. And he actually doesn't hide how racist he is. And how can we resist it? How can the international community help us? Yes, as Ionata says, you should pressure the Brazilian government to track the meat industry in this country, because most of the meat that we're exporting to Europe comes from illegal farms in Amazon, in Cerrado, in the Pantanal. You should pressure the Brazilian government to track the meat, and not only Europe, but also create landmarks for the whole international community, because the government Bolsonaro right now the basis of the economy in Brazil is the exportation of soy to China. So China is stopping to produce soy, but it's buying from Brazil, and the dollar is like overestimated right now in Brazil. We stopped producing industrial means to produce meat, to produce soy, to produce beans, and we're producing these to sell to other countries. So right now, the Brazilian population is starving as we sell to other countries what we produce. So yes, we should create also a kind of law, a kind of pressure in the international community for the food security in Brazil, because it would be good to protect the food security of our population, but also to track the meat, also to track the money. And please, we should start the consumption of gold, of I forgot the word. We should stop the consumption of gold, silver, and precious metals. We should stop now, because we're contaminating the rivers in Amazon. We're contaminating and killing thousands of people in Brazil. We should stop now. We should pressure our government to stop the minings. We are not only contaminating the rivers, we are seeing in Minas Gerais whole cities fearing the dam burst, because Minas Gerais, as the name says, Minas Gerais, it will be translated as the general mines, general mines, if we translate the name of the state, general mines. It is a state where the mining in Brazil started, and its economy is still based on mining, and we're seeing population of whole cities. I mean, like 20,000, 30,000 people fearing the dam bursts. And we need to stop mining in Brazil. We need to stop mining, especially illegal mining in Brazil. So if we can pressure in international community some laws or some strategies to force the Bolsonaro government to stop mining, to track the meat, to create landmarks for food security for Brazilian population, I guess we would all thank, as the international community, we would all thank for the next generations.
Thanks so much, Camille.
Oh.
Linda, is that your hand up, or?
Yeah, I just say it's a great point for Camille to talk about it, because every moment everyone talk about Amazonia, and it's very important, obviously, but Brazil have a lot of places to need to preserve, and we don't have an opportunity to talk about it because the urgency to talk about Amazonia. But you can say, oh, why the Brazilian people continue doing something like that with the natural? But the people need to work. That's if you look Brazil, how Brazil receive money. You look Brazil receive money for the meat, for soil, for these things. So if we want to change something, we needed to put the government really interesting to change the things, because the people do that because they wanted to eat or something like that. So the big thing here, it is pressure the government to change the way to make a business, to change the way to show Brazil for the international communities, and how we can pressure the government to do that is make the government lose money. I think that is the way.
So I'll just answer the next question. The main problem is not the soy consumption for humans. The main problem is the soy consumption for the cattle, because we're deforesting to create cattle and we're feeding the cattle with the soy. So we should track meat, not the soy consumption for humans, because the impact of the soy consumption by humans is like really small when compared to the soy consumption by cattle or by other animals which we're consuming as chicken or pigs or wherever. We should track the meat. And as you also, yes, good point, Caleb. The issue of the U.S. sanctions is that yes, it is. The U.S. sanctions, I don't believe that Biden is going to save the Brazilian population with the economic sanctions. No, he's not. And we know for the history what happens when the U.S. applies sanctions to any country. Know that population struggles. So I don't believe in the sanctions of Biden. I think that we should have other kinds of agreements in the international community, as stopping buying meat, or pressuring. I was in Canada last year and I was surprised because every single restaurant, every single place where they sell food, they have they announce that the meat comes from Canada and comes from legal properties. It does not solve the whole problem, but it will be a way to stop the illegal farms in Brazil, because we are struggling with the meat industry and the illegal meat industry in Brazil. So I don't really like the idea of Biden saving Amazon or Biden saving Cerrado or anything in Brazil with the U.S. sanctions. I think the population, mostly indigenous and Black population, will suffer. I don't believe in this kind of economic sanctions. I believe in agreements. I believe in international pressure. I believe in information. I believe in education. I believe that we should educate our kids since the very early ages to know about the environmental problems and to preserve the environment. So I don't know if I asked you, but yes, I don't believe in Biden. I believe in other kinds of agreements in the international communities. I believe in the power of the Black communities, the Quilombola communities, and indigenous communities to address these issues. I don't believe that this white guy will solve our problems. As long as we don't have the indigenous people to address the policies in environmental area, as long as we don't hear, as long as we don't have a leader who is indigenous to address the policies, I don't believe we're going the right way. I think that white people should step back and let indigenous people talk, and let people talk, and not only talk, but make policies, because they are making policies to survive for over than 400 years here in Brazil. So they know how to make policies to survive, and they know how to make policies to end the climate changes. So I think the solution is white people, please step back and let indigenous people of the whole world talk, and let Black communities talk, and let them make the policies for the food security, and let them make the policies for the urban areas affected by the climate changes, and let them address the problems of deforestation, and let us not only speak, but make policies. So I think the change of the mindset of who is in power and who is in the leadership of our countries, of these international problem, which is the climate changes, is essential for change. So yes, we need to look back for our history and understand that the whole problem of the extractivism, the whole problem of the climate change, it started with white people. So white people are not the ones who are going to stop it. We need people of color to stop it. So I think the whole message is about who is in power and who is making policies.
Thanks, Camille. Alinta, did you want to jump in there?
I was just trying to open the mic. No, I was just agreeing, just had a comment agreeing with Camille, because I think there is some kind of hypocrisy also of the West, because even when for example, from the French government criticizing the Bolsonaro, France has also part of Amazonia. France has a territory like French Guyana, and they also not respecting the environment. So I think that's why I wanted just to comment on that the fact that actually there is a bit of hypocrisy from the West, because they are the one that's pushing for which actually complacent and encouraging the exploitation of the Amazon. And even when there was a whole article about that, like when the French president actually criticized Bolsonaro, they were saying, yeah, but look at what France is doing in the same continent, because you have also part of Amazonia, and you also have mining occurring in French Guyana, which is a really poor, also is a porous territory in the French territory. And this is the same thing, because they have also indigenous population and also in real inequalities. So I think I was just agreeing on what Camille said. And I also had a question about the Quilombo. I think it's not necessarily for the is more probably like urban, but there is a law that should protect, or should if there is a proof that there was a Quilombo there, if I'm not mistaken, they should be protected. But how does it work in a city like Rio, which I think there is a Quilombo in the Leblon, for example, in this posh neighborhood of Rio? How does it work there? How do people claim back this territory? And is it possible in Rio at the moment?
As answering you, yes, we should study hypocrisy on the environmental area. As I said, white people, European people, we started the whole problem, so you're not the one who are going to solve it. So please stop the history of being the heroes of the world. Use through the word. Sorry for the vocabulary, but we need to change the mindset, because this mindset is also colonialist. Of, oh, Biden is going to put some pressure on the Brazilian government. Okay, but first of all, the largest company of meat of the world, which is Brazilian, actually moved to United States, and now I think that 70% of JBS, which is this company, 70% of the money stays in the United States, and they don't pay taxes. They pay like a little short amount of taxes in Brazil. So why don't Biden make this company pay more taxes to Brazil? So yes, it's hypocrisy. And the quilombola, yes. Actually, I live nearby a quilombo here in Niterói. You should come home. So
I think I've passed.
yes, I live nearby a quilombo. And answering also the question of the difference between the Lula government to this government is that we had better laws. They were not enough to protect indigenous people and lands and to protect quilombolas people and lands, but the laws existed and there were more I forgot the word. Let me just Google it. And there was more oversight of the laws in the government of Lula and Dilma, and also Lula and Dilma government, which they are from the Workers' Party, the PT, and PT has a huge support from the Sem Terras. I will translate this. The MST is the movement of workers who have no access to lands, and they're also keepers of the environment in Brazil. And the main difference from the Bolsonaro government to Lula government is that basically laws, oversight of the laws, and also who were supporting this government. So here in Brazil, I think that not only the indigenous people and Quilombola people, but we had to look at the workers of the rural areas who have no access to lands, because they're also the environment keepers, because they use no pesticides, because they grow organic food, because they do not own like big amounts of lands to plant only one kind of grain or only soil or only I don't know. They don't do the monoculture. So it is essential to our food security and also to preserve the environment. And so Anita, the main difference and the way they keep the quilombos in the urban areas is by their resistance right now, because we have this minister of environment who is Ricardo Salles, and they are destroying every single policy in the environmental area and in the in keeping the lands of Quilombola people and keeping the lands of indigenous people. And as I say, the situation is so bad that right now our guarantees are that people are changing the mindset and starting to look at these communities as keepers of the future of the whole country. We're starting to change the mindset. So we're doing advocacy to keep the laws, to change the laws, to keep the oversight of the laws. And we're resisting, we're striving to make some changes. As I said, this is not the first time we are facing violence. This is not the first time we're facing a government that is against us. Actually, indigenous people and Quilombola people suffered a lot during the dictatorship in Brazil. which lasted 21 years from 64 to 85. And I believe we have the knowledge to resist, but we also need the whole population of this country to look at these problems and face these problems. I think that the main problem in Brazil is that we did not face and repaired racism. I believe these changes are going to happen when we sit and talk about how are we going to repair indigenous people, how are we going to repair Black people. Because here in Brazil, everybody thinks that, oh, it is so lovely that Germany repaired the Jews and the Holocaust lasted for 5 years. But the people in Brazil did not think about repairing slavery, which lasted for over 330 years in this country. So I think that for us to not only slavery, but also the genocide of the indigenous population. So I think that we are going to see real changes for the future, not only of this country, but the future of the world. Because yes, we have the biggest rainforest of the world in our country. We're only going to see real changes when we start talking seriously about repairing indigenous communities and repairing Quilombolas communities and repairing Black communities in this country. We're only going to see real changes, and those are going to be great changes not only for these communities but for the whole world, for white people in Brazil and wherever they are. Because in this way, we're going to keep the environment safe. We're going to keep people safe from pesticides. We're going to keep people safe from police brutality. We're going to keep people safe from landsliding, because we're going to discuss the housing policies in this country. Housing policies in Brazil are also connected to environmental racism, as you know. So I think there is a long way to go. I don't think I'm going to see all these changes while I'm alive or while anyone of us is alive, but I think that it is important, it is fundamental that we keep fighting. We keep fighting back. We keep surviving. We keep building legacies for who's coming after us.
Thank you so much, Camille and Nalinta and Aynata. And I always hate this job, but just because I said it was 7:30, so if people do have to leave, then you can do so. And if anyone wants to also stay for a few more minutes, we will be staying on. But just to say that to anybody who does have to go at 7:30, thanks. And if people are okay to stay a little bit longer, to kind of close up in a less abrupt way, then we'll stay on for a bit longer. And yeah.
So I will just write for you in the chat for you to look in Google, how do you spell Cerrado, or how do you spell Pantanal? Please spread the word, because we need to talk not only about Amazon, we need to talk Cerrado, mainly the Cerrado, because as I said, if the Cerrado burns, we won't have water in Brazil. So I'll just write in the chat what you should know about this. Please Google, please spread the word. Please let people know in Europe or wherever you are about what's happening in Cerrado and also in Pantanal.
I hate to be the well, I don't know. I would never want to cut like this conversation short because they're so interesting and like informative to listen to. So again, as you've just said, I'll try and keep it brief to sort of summarize. And if anyone has to go, obviously feel free. And obviously, if there are any questions afterwards, and people do want to stay and ask. But I'll just draw on some what we heard from today, and what that might mean for the 13th and our actions in Leeds. But obviously, firstly, and above all, a massive thank you to Camille and Ayanata for taking the time and energy to speak to us, especially during the middle of your shift, Ayanata, which is really impressive. But thank you for taking the time to reach out and be in contact with us. Your knowledge and insights into the histories you've described have been really eye-opening, and I really want to express solidarity from the bottom of my heart, not just in words, but also in actions too. I think sometimes it can be difficult to know what solidarity really looks like from here in Leeds, the UK, a part of the global north that has exploited so many resources and ecosystems of the global south, and continues to do so, as we saw in those videos. But I've been thinking a lot lately about one of the founding principles of the Zapatistas, which is fight for a world where many worlds fit. And then I look to the world in which we're here in Leeds, that we're a part of, and I can't help but feeling that we're kind of taught the opposite here. We live in a place where we're taught that there is only one way to knowing the world, one way to valuing each other and the planet. But someone in this video said that this land belongs to all of us and we all belong to the land. And it just kind of reminds that there's no world that can dominate. But so much of what we do in the UK and the global north, or the minority of this planet, have been taught to know, and what we've learned is geared towards kind of ensuring this domination of this one world that we live in Leeds. And what I mean by this world is this capitalist system or machine that's driven by this neoliberal ideology where capital and the market is always held as like necessary to live a happy life. But we know this is the driver of the same kind of colonial forces and the same violence and displacement and the stripping back of the rights of indigenous people. This capitalist world systemically is exploiting people through environmental racism, as Cami showed us, leaving those at the margins literally falling off the edge of cliffs and landslides and flooding. I also just want to draw on this quote from Asad Rehman from War on Want, an event on the weekend about red, black, green New Deals that are so needed. And he said it's been a luxury of the global north to be able to see climate justice, racial justice, migrant justice, economic justice as separate. Whereas for the global south, the system was never failing, but a system that was created to do exactly what it is doing, which is to exploit. And from listening tonight, we can see the effects this has on communities, not just in terms of their rights, but also in terms of how we collectively lose knowledge systems. So something that Melanie pointed out to me the other day, which I can't stop thinking about, is the fact that 80% of global biodiversity is protected by indigenous people, who make up less than 5% of the world's population. So this knowledge is like fundamental to the planet's survival. Yet the kind of one world of capitalism, as Camille also showed us, and it's like markets of meat production, are threatening not just these ecosystems, but all of these knowledge, traditions, cultures that look after these ecosystems. But lastly, I think most of us coming in here to this workshop would recognize how deeply problematic and traumatic this world of capitalism that we live in and have expanded across the world is. But one of the problems I sometimes find is that it's often hard to think of alternatives, or actually think of the truth is that usually it's easier not to think of alternatives. But we've also learned from these kind of histories of Colombo people and these indigenous communities that there are alternatives. And in one of these videos, these communities showed us when they were allowed their land titles, how they felt, and they were sort of seemed truly happy. And I think one guy said sort of he feels like he can fly happily like a bird. And you can see that in the background of such a beautiful ecosystem that they were living in. And from tonight, I can't help but thinking about how different the Amazon might look if the Colombo people were recognized and given the land titles that they are owed, meaning I think someone said it was around 60%, it covers 60% of the Amazon, which is an incredible thought if that is right. Yeah, I really hate saying that it's easier to imagine the end of the world, the end of capitalism, because it denies these thousands of examples of resistance that are going on in the world right now. And some of the examples that we've seen that are under threat. And this is where I think the 13th becomes so important, because it's about unlearning the colonialism and the racism of this world and showing that kind of solidarity to those who are resisting it. and to those who are showing us that there are alternative ways of living with the planet and with each other. And we can do this by standing in solidarity with these communities and people who lead the way in showing us these alternatives. And also for white people like me, that means stepping aside and maybe less summarizing of events, especially events like this, but platforming the voices of those who are leading the struggle. And that also means, like Cami said, about putting pressure on governments and holding those that are responsible for this exploitation to account, especially when we're also the ones benefiting from these very markets of like meat, metals, and soya, and are causing so much of this destruction. And then further still, we need to fight for the reparations that you mentioned briefly at the end as well. And so I think this can be what we mean by thinking globally, the aspect of the 13th. And then also enacting locally, we can kind of create these alternative worlds that we all need here in Leeds too, as we're doing through this group, and make sure that kind of whatever anti-capitalist, anti-racist worlds we do create, they're ones that are built on solidarity and where many worlds fit. So again, thank you so much to Camille and Ayanata, and to everyone for coming along. And yeah, I think if anyone wants to sort of stay for more questions, or if it's actually 10 minutes over time. So yeah, anyway, but thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful, and thank you facilitators as well, Caleb in Spain, and yeah, all of you. But thank you.
Thank you. If someone desire to make a contact, Penny have my phone number, my email, can read for me. I really lovely talk about that. You go very amazing, answer your questions.
Cool. Melanie, did you want to say something? I know obviously we're still here. The ones who are staying, but yeah, did you want to say something?
Well, I'm just processing, to be honest. It's really nice to hear the solidarity and the stories alongside communities of South America. I come from a family who grew up in the countryside and like lived around a lot of violence due to paramilitary action around my family, and I understand how traumatizing and difficult it is to speak about just the various conflicts that are happening in the land, and maybe drawing a bit of attention of how important land is in terms of identity, and how difficult it has been for myself, like personally, to kind of process that transgenerational trauma that exists in the land. And yeah, I'm really grateful to speak and feel the energy of other women in different parts of the world that share a similar lived experience. Maybe I just wanted to ask to Camille if she wanted to speak about how she relates to this experience of being a woman in this colluding multiple difficulties, not only a woman, but a woman of color in South America. In Brazil specifically, yeah.
Okay, may I answer this, or should we wait for more questions?
Ayanata also just saying she's leaving soon, so I don't know whether you've got to say something before you disappear. But it's fine if not.
Good idea. Jonathan?
Yes, I need to go. Some colleagues come here to help her with a patient. So thank you so much for listening us, and have a spirit to try to help something and change face in Brazil. So the Quilombola communities need support, financial support, and like Camila says, talk about it. If you are parents, talk about it to every people you can, just for try to change the way we walk in these days. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and for stay here and talk about it, the climate future.
Oh, thank you so, so much, Ayanata, and take care.
So the experience of being a Black young woman in Brazil, actually, we cannot take my experience as unique because we live in a country which is the same size as a whole continent. Many countries of Europe feeding Brazil's shape. So I'm a Black man from the south of Brazil. I don't know if you learned it, but the south of Brazil is the area that received the biggest part of the European immigrants back in the end of the 19th century and in the beginning of the 27th century when they ended slavery in Brazil. So it is the most racist area of this country. I came from a state that is compared to Texas because it is so racist and violent. And I think that my experience as a Black lesbian woman in Brazil it's at the same time so unique, but at the same time is the experience of many women in here. It is not, I see that it is not easy to have access to information, access to education. Actually, I am an exception because I was adopted by a white family. So when I was 15, I was living in Mexico. I already knew English. I already knew French. So I'm an exception in this country. But as an exception, I try to make a path for other young Black girls to come through this path and do this in an easier way than I did. But I see the experience of Black women in Brazil as experience of resistance. We are the ones who keep our communities alive. We are the ones who make policies in everyday basis to keep the child, to keep the man, to keep everyone who's around us alive. And these policies, these agreements that we make since the very beginning of the slavery in this country are the technologies that allow the Black communities to succeed. Actually, the Black population in Brazil corresponds to 55%, and still we don't have like Black women in the Congress. We have like a really short amount of Black women in the city councils or as mayors. So even though we don't have the power, we keep our communities alive. So I think that this country almost justice, this country almost peace, this country almost the wealth. We had the access to financial resources, if we have the access to sanitation, if we had the access to education, I think not only the Black community would succeed in this country, but I think that only when we have the access to all of these and represent as Black women, this whole country will be better. I think Brazil would be Brazil is a wealth country. I think that is the ninth or the 10th economy of the world. But the population, the well-being of the population is not the 9th or the 10th in the world. So I think that if we had Black women in power in Brazil, we would have a better economy, we would have better policies, we would have peace, because Brazil is really, really violent. So I think that my experience shows that when we have access to education, when we have access to just a bit of financial resources, we can do a lot. We can do a lot. And even when we don't have it, we still do a lot for our communities. So I think the main problem is the access to opportunities, not only in Brazil, but in the whole world. And at the same time, I can connect to the other Black women in diaspora. I can connect to Alinta, I can connect to Penny, I can connect to my Black friends in Canada, because our experience is unique, but it is global. You are a Black woman in any place of the world. Anywhere I go, I'll be read as Black. So I guess we have the potential to connect our experience in diaspora. And I think that we should have the chance to fix our countries, not only Brazil, but, you know, also United States, as we are seeing, but also Canada, but also every other country in the world who suffered from the slavery of Black people. I think Black women are the leaders of the communities. I think that Black feminism is essential to the to our struggle to support the whole communities of Black people. So I don't know if I answered you. But
yeah.
In a short, I mean that. In a short, I mean that I am an exception, and I know what access to education might do for Black women, and I hope other Black women and other Black girls, I hope that the girls who are younger than me have the same message, and we are trying to make it happen. So yes.
Yeah, just to comment a few, that I think the reason why I asked that question is because the Racial Justice Network is that special place where we can welcome stories without making them simple, and welcome the whole story instead of like simplifying and trying to take the few bits that sometimes other platforms that don't have this understanding of how intersectional this conversation has to be. And so that's why I'm so grateful to be able to listen to your story and welcome it through you. And so thank you, Penny. This is a great experience. Thank you.
No, I'd say thank you, everybody, because I think the commitment and love and share that everybody brings into this space has made this place and space what it is now. To think back to March, I hadn't met some of you, and here we are organizing, doing stuff. But I feel like I've been lucky enough to meet amazing people like Camille, like Alinta, I mean, all of you actually. When I think back, and I'm trying to constantly like engage and connect people some more, because it's enriched my life in so many ways. And I think, yeah, and I love what you just said there, Melanie, about how we welcome stories without making them simple. I've never thought of it like that, but that's a really good way of that whole intersectional approach. And I'm also grateful, Alinta, for you joining. I know you were doing a lecture today, you finished and you joined us, but just for the sake of people who don't know Alinta, she's based in London from Martinique, and sorry, I'm doing the intro for you because you didn't do it before.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mic.
and speaks multiple languages. So Alinta became my translator in Rio. So somebody wanted to speak to me. I'm like, where is Alinta? Because Alinta can speak French, Spanish, English, God knows what else. So yeah, and I'm really grateful that you were able to join us this evening to assist and kind of offer that solidarity to Camille and others as well. And also for people for the brilliant questions. That was really good.
I love, yeah, thank you for inviting me. It was nice to see Camille. And I love Brazil, so, you know, it's just like, despite its problems.
I love Brazil. Brazil is amazing.
I didn't want to leave the country. I was
Please
crying when I had
come
to leave. So.
Yeah, I'll keep
Please
you
come after
updated. Sorry, I was going to say I will keep you updated on what we've done, because what we started off as a 13th is done quite amazing because of the solidarity of this group in terms of intervention and this whole concept around internationalism. So we'll keep you posted, and you're welcome again to join some other sessions that we have in future. But yeah, I can see Shannon writing away in the background. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else we want to add, or we can say goodbye.
Just to say absolutely
Yes.
massive thank you. Thank you so much, Camila. Thank you, Linda, as well. Yeah, honestly brilliant. Thank you so much. And yeah, Melanie, I love that expression as well. That was just beautiful. I just love it when Melanie speaks. So yeah, it was such a beautiful, beautiful enriching night, and thank you so much. And yeah, that was a beautiful closing. But yeah, thank you.
Camille, were you going to say something, or should we say goodbye? Because I know
Yes. I was just going to thank you for the opportunity to share. I had a lot of data, and I really mean to organize this data and send you in a paper or any kind of test, because I think these are important data for us to discuss the climate changes with this environmental racism approach, and to hold European people responsible. I always do the joke. Swiss people always brag of having the best chocolate in the world, but you can't grow cocoa in Swiss. So think about it, about the hypocrisy of being concerned about the environmental changes, about climate changes, to think about colonialism. You can't grow cocoa in Swiss. You don't have gold in Europe. You don't have silver in Europe. So it all comes from South America. It all comes from Africa. And if you want to hold yourself responsible, please start repairing us for stealing these metals, for stealing the cocoa production, for consuming so much meat and importing meat from our countries. And so I think the message is this: please, let's start talking about reversion. Let's start taking few steps behind, and let Black women, let Indigenous women lead the changes that we need. We've seen so much bad decisions being taken from all over the centuries by the colonialist mindset. Let's not let this happen again. And yes, thank you so much. Thank you. It was nice to see you again, Penny, Sharon, Alita, also Yonata. Yonata is a big friend of mine, and I haven't seen her since last year. And with the pandemics, it became an impossible task. And thank you for the questions. I hope I made myself understandable. I hope I have touched your minds and hearts. I hope we keep in touch and keep thinking about how we are going to change the mindsets, how we're going to build policies, even if it is a micro revolution we make, it is still a revolution. So let's keep in touch, let's discuss, let's share. I'm ready to hear your experiences in Europe. I'm ready to hear what you've been doing in racial justice. I think it is important to have people everywhere discussing these kinds of issues. So thank you so much. I hope we all stay connected, and I hope we all stay fighting, and we stay ready to fight back all this injustice in the environmental area, in the racial area. So yes, that's it. Thank you for the opportunity. And once again, I'm so thankful for you. And I'm here if you need anything, just WhatsApp me. I'll be here to answer you.
Thank you so much.
I say
Thank you
goodbye
so much,
now.
Camille.
Bye with message on WhatsApp. Bye.